What's going on, listeners? Welcome to the latest episode of Can I Kick It, the number one podcast for Black history. As we approach 1 year of change of this nation, we sit down today at our 1 year show anniversary to talk about how much has changed, what has gone different for Black footballers in this country, and more. And for today's show, I'm joined by almost a two-time guest. He was on River City 93. He's Mr. Devante Dubose. How are you doing, sir?
What's up, my man? Well, first of all, before I even came on live, I didn't know it was the 1 year anniversary. Or maybe, I didn't know that. So this is a privilege and honor. So I feel honored, and I'm good,
man.
by the way. I'm good, by the way.
That's what's up, man. Yeah, it's our 1 year anniversary. Me and Shanair started a podcast on Juneteenth. That's when we dropped our first 3 episodes on DeMarcus Beasley, Wendy Bernard, and Lincoln Phillips. And ever since then, man, we've been going on ever since. So it's a pleasure to have you on.
I'm honored.
So for today's episode, man, we really just want to have a conversation about how this past year has been for Black footballers in this country. And as you know, like we recently just had the 1 year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. Also, here in our own city of Richmond, Virginia, about all the riots and, the tearing down of the monuments here on Monument Avenue. I just want to ask you, before we started everything else, how has this 1 year been for you personally?
Whew. Man, I could probably spend a while going into the depths of like how it's impacted me, like at the surface level, then like just beyond that, which is actually the root of the impact of the social issues. But for me, to be honest, in having my coach, like, one thing, my coach, my organization is, what they do is say, hey, they want to make sure how you're doing. And when you come to play for a team, you're there to win. And like soccer is a focus. However, when it's something that's extremely personal, for me, obviously as a black man, but just at a human level, for me, it's so hard to ignore. Um, so to try to just process, like seeing, the amount of really just chaos and trauma, and then obviously seeing, what comes along with that, and it's tough to process, because when you're also in an environment, or you're in a place where a lot of, our history took place. It kind of really just adds a whole another level of reflection and emotion. So to try to compartmentalize that, challenge me, and I come from a human behavior aspect, as far as like my drive, my passions, and my desire to learn. So I think for me, it was a new challenge. And to be honest, I thought I did okay managing it, but just based off the feedback of, as you know, like I tore my ACL last year during the comeback, and I had to think about, you never want to say this is why, a catalyst, right? The same way I'm pretty sure we're gonna get into it, but you think about a catalyst event, like something that happened, right? And it's easy to place all your emotions on what happened. But I think we're doing as a collective, community, is that we're having to do more work of the why. So to make it personal, like my knee was in events, and the why is COVID, social injustice was like easy to put my emotions and say, oh yeah, I'm frustrated. But it put a pause on, like, my pace in life, and allowed me to reflect on my purpose. Something of my physical nature is taken away. Um, and to really just kind of conclude, because I know we have so much to talk about, of like how did it impact me personally, just this event. Woo, the surface for me was okay, I could process it, but it was everything after. So it was tough to try to, like I said, to try to place it in places and protect myself. It was tough. And ultimately, I straight up, I didn't fail, but I definitely grew a lot. I'm gonna say that much. I grew a lot, and I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't change it, because my perspective today, based on that year, like, wow, I learned a lot.
Yeah, no, most definitely. Definitely was a challenging year. So one of the points that you brought up, and I want to ask you about this is, you know better than anyone else, being a black person in the workspace, about how we've always been taught at a young age, our generation at least, of you have to separate personal and work.
Mm,
You know, you
mm,
don't want to ever intermix the two. And I definitely know, like this year, for me personally, it was very hard to do that because you're working at home. You know, you don't
mm.
have the no longer the 20-minute drive to work anymore where you can just like decompose and leave work at home at home. How was it for you as a footballer having to deal with all the personal stuff that's going on, dealing with those emotions of seeing, you know, black people being murdered on TV, or, you know, people in political roles saying crazy stuff out of their mouth? How did you deal with it as a football player?
Yeah, again, it's like when you end off like the words as a football player, right? So like that asked me to speak from a perspective of, of a soccer player. And if really, to be honest, if I'm speaking from like a soccer player perspective, that's like really a very small fraction of how I really understand, the issue. So with that being said, it's it's like how do I actually communicate what I really mostly feel? You know what I'm saying? So I guess you can say it puts me in a very difficult situation um, to process and then obviously communicate. Because I was going to say, start off with, well, honesty in a time in an emotional state is the hardest thing to do, especially the one feel, but then communicate. So, like I said, if I'm trying to communicate everything that I do feel, but as a soccer player, um, I have to if I have to speak from that perspective, I'm not able to tell you really how much, that 80-90%. So again, that's a tough one to ask. That's like asking, you know, almost asking me to do like the obvious, but not the obvious at the same time, if that makes sense. So it can be very confusing. But I think the best way to acknowledge it is really just about be as honest as you can. Because when you can be honest as you can, you don't have expectations. You're speaking from your heart, and if somebody's going to accept your honesty, because for me that's what my club did, and that's why I came here. So to really answer that, question directly, I was okay. The same reason I was okay with coming here, and I've learned through my career, is try to be as honest as you can, as hard as that is. And coming from Darren, his position, even as a white male, but also as my other peers who come from so many different backgrounds, uh, initially it's going to be hard to be honest. I feel coming from a black man, but just a black soccer player or a soccer player in general, but being honest was like really my power, even in that situation. So just being honest, because it ended up being accepted, and ended up the arms started to reach out and say, hey, how can we uplift our platform to help you? And then it acts upon myself, how can I be more honest, with myself, and utilize these arms that's reaching out to me. So just honesty.
Yeah, I'll tell a personal story about how when everything was starting off, about right around, I think it was right around this time, I think I reached out to you
Mm.
personally. I was like, hey,
Yep.
what can the Red Army do to help, support the club? Or, what are the things the players need from us to help you guys out? Because we're all isolated this time, last year. You put it very frankly, you were just like, don't be afraid to have those conversations. They're going to be tough. They're going to be hard. Don't be afraid to have them. And one of the things that I can say that I respect about most about you is that you are very honest. You are very to
Mm.
the point. Um, and that's one thing that we've seen a lot
Mm.
of with black players, and not only players but head coaches and fans. A lot over this past year of being able to step into that space and not only challenging others, but also being there and helping those out that want to have this conversation. Because some black people, we're very jaded. We hold on to hurt, but we have to have those where
Mm.
in our community that are able to open our hearts and able to accept help at the same time. If that makes sense.
Oh, it makes so much sense because that's literally it's hard to do, but it makes sense. But that's how honesty works. It's a two-way street. It's not a one-way street. So, but when it's aligned, I mean, I think we know what happens. Love tends to unfold, and also understanding begins to happen. You know what I'm saying? But when it's not, it's only coming from one end. Oh, I mean, then you're going to get, you're going to start a fire. And I think that's what we've witnessed, in a sort of sense. Not that we're in the same place, but now that we are honest about one situation, it's like now it's time to be honest about more. You know what I'm saying? Because until the more you can get honest, that means the more we're kind of getting closer to the solution. and trust me, if I know anything about history, we have quite a bit of years to get to the solution. So the faster we can be honest, and the more we can be honest together, that means that we can solve this problem quicker than we think. But again, it takes a individual honesty and a collective honesty and that alignment to accelerate there. Look, we got people who've done it. We got people who set the tone for me, you, and I. So I think it's really funny because I always use this word. The answer is literally always right in front of us, but it takes understanding for us to see it. But
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Very true. So I want to kind of put you back in the frame of mind of last year when everything was happening last year with the rise that was happening across the nation, definitely in our own city.
mm,
What were your emotions like, and how were those conversations between you and your teammates, not only in the Richmond Kickers, but I'm pretty sure you had other teammates and other former colleagues reaching out to you. How were those conversations? Were they easy? Were they hard? How was your emotional state at that time?
to be again, for me to try to be as honest as I can, they were hard for me to understand like what I was feeling. I had to almost I picked up I was actually reading at the same time. I was reading Martin Luther King's Community or Chaos. So really I put myself, and before I came to Richmond, you know where I stopped? My last stop was in Memphis, Tennessee. I went
Oh,
out
wow.
into Rain Hotel. I sent you probably see a video on my Instagram. I put myself there and I became very emotional because not of where his last breaths were, but because of the journey, you know, he got to being there and the knowing that he had within himself, knowing the sacrifice. Um, I felt that. I'm feeling it now. And I think that's what I felt. And so it's very hard for me to put that in words to not my peers, but it's hard for me to communicate that within myself. You know what I'm saying? And it's hard for me to do that um, consistently because I'm low in energy. It's hard for me to do that every day, to be consistent. So it is challenging. But the best that I can do is acknowledge the like people's willingness to want to learn, and I think that's where my cup, like I can give more, and that's probably why I probably to a certain extent never got tired because people's were willing to understand. And whenever people are willing to understand, I have to give more. That I think that's my obsession in all areas of my life. But when we talk about something like this, Daryl, and we can get to a solution, and this is a window where we can get to a solution, then best believe I'm gonna give like a lot, you know, more if I can. So again, teammates, uh, just to feel to acknowledge their willingness is the beginning, like you said, these conversations, and then it was just a domino effect because everybody is, obviously USL BPA was established, and just to be connected to the rest of my league, of soccer players, of people of color, you kind of do share a feeling. However, it's hard to embrace and communicate how we all feel at the same time, you know. So it's challenging, but we've made connections. You know what I'm saying? And that's just the beginning. The more connections we can make, the more we can move forward.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about USL BPA. For those who don't know, the USL not only has a player association, but also has a Black player association as well that was created last year. We're 1 year into that, and you're part of
Mhm.
that organization. How has that organization itself grown with over the one course of year? And what are some of the things you guys are looking to build upon after your 1 year?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely lost traction. I'm gonna tell you why. Because we're soccer players, right? And you know the amount of energy that it takes to make sure you're there for yourself or for your teammates. And it's a long season, so there's not too many windows for you to, uh, there's not too many windows for you to put your attention in too many other places. So you have to be very strategic, just with anything else. But the fact that the space is there means that over time that the space will continue to exist, but the space will continue to grow and evolve. So it's a lack of of traction, just simply because of our sport and what it asks us to do. But it allows us to have a space that is made, and USL has allocated, you know, that time and space for us, which means that at least we get to make those connections. I wish there were more often, but they are. We get to have them. Um, so again, to keep it more positive, the space is there. Obviously, there's a lot of things that were that USL BPA, we're partnering with the USL to kind of get in the communities of our regional markets and to kind of tell stories and to kind of raise awareness and to be really, entrepreneurial in terms of how can we generate for each community, based off, you know, who, what brothers are in what communities and how can we help. So we're always doing that work. It's not as diligent, as we want it to be, but it's there. And I think we have to acknowledge that, you know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of stuff in the works. And Hugh Roberts and Brandon and a lot of those guys are the captains of that ship. And I think they're giving more energy. So I have to also acknowledge that because they actually are, because they're the captains of those ships there. And they're taking on more weight along with their jobs and positions on the field. So, whew, just knowing how I have to, like, maintain my energy, like I'm got to give my flowers to those two cats and those three, actually, the few other directors. Just knowing, like, because they have to communicate, and they have the desire and passion to, but I definitely have to acknowledge that as well.
Yeah, we've talked to Hugh and Brandon a couple of times, man. Those
Hmm.
guys definitely for being the torchbearers. It's a heavy is the crown, they say. Heavy is the crown, they
Hmm.
say.
Yeah.
Um, so I want to also ask you this because who else better to ask this question to than someone that plays on the field and having supporters. How can supporters and fans best support players of color and best support black players? Because a lot of the times we think that having a banner is enough, or doing T-shirts, or doing smoke in different colors. But what are some effective ways that people are looking to have positive change, not only within their soccer stadium in their communities, but also in their outside in their communities in the surrounding areas?
Oh, great question. And I think when fans come to watch us, obviously they come to watch a collective movement. And when we do that and orchestrate that through our coaches, skills, and then obviously it comes in this full circle. Then that hopefully we come out with a result. So the fans are there for an experience. To ask of them to get more out of it, will be trying to ask them to do something, in a time of entertainment and chaos, be a lot of hard to do at that time. However, um, I think what we're doing, the spaces that's connected to the player, uh, a community stakeholder, a fan, a family man, black man, the fact that we have this and we can tie it to our organization and which our fans are connected to means that, and they love us, creating a bridge. That means that it's a possibility for them to watch it, when they're at home for leisure time. So what that will allow is getting to my point, is that it allows them to reflect on themselves. So the best thing that I think our fans and spectators, even players, is to continue to when we have that extra time, is to really go within ourselves first, right? Say, hey, what's my purpose? What's my why? Uh, and yeah, start there. Start with yourself, and guarantee um, you're going to start to look. Your outward look will be, will be what you looking within. You know what I'm saying? So start within. Outward look will probably have the same positivity. So I think to ask people to do that first is probably my first recommendation. Is start with yourself, and then I really think the rest will follow. And I think naturally, when you do that, you're going to get people to look at things like this more. Also, you're probably going to just get regular casual smiles down the street, and people just starting to understand the impact of just positive behavior. You know what I'm saying? And just general positive behavior. So start with yourself first. How can I be a better human? You know what I'm saying? How can I give more of my time here on earth to somebody else? How can I let them know that I'm happy for them? And then that would translate into, treating everybody equally. Like that's where we start, and I think that can go into so many different vessels that we create. So
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, it's always interesting because as supporters, we always think like, oh, this is support, but
mm,
it's interesting to hear how you guys playing on the field, interpret that support and see it as well. So I'm going to kind of pivot the conversation a little bit, but still staying track of everything that's happened over the course of the year.
mm-hmm,
So recently, you came out and you had a magnificent article on mental health,
mm,
and that's really been a big talking point over the course here. Of course, everyone's been at home working and
yeah,
dealing with mental health. For you, how was it going through that journey? I know there were peaks and valleys in it, but how was it going navigating that journey of mental health? But also, what kind of things did your club do to help you? And was it easy
yeah,
to go to your club and be like, "Hey, I'm struggling with this"?
right. Uh, that's just a great multitude of questions. And first, I have to acknowledge um, I'm happy that it's a trend right now. I'm happy that the circumstances of 2020 allowed people to kind of collectively see the same thing, not even see, but you get a sense of there is a different dynamic in our social spaces. What is that? And that's why we're more open to the word in itself, mental, let alone health. You know what I'm saying? So for that, I'm thankful. Um, there's a lot of suffering that came along, with that time of COVID, obviously for people who lost their lives. But I think through suffering, obviously there's a greater light on the end of the tunnel if we can understand that. The same way that's how we understand mental health. It's because it's a very complex thing to understand. And in my case, like I said, how do you get help is okay, I need to help myself first. And that became my survival. Literally became my survival because if I didn't, then I would have been in a pattern, right? I would have been in a pattern, and I probably wouldn't be playing soccer, let alone doing a lot of other things. So because of my nature, my competitive nature, and my desire to learn, I said I have to figure this out, and it starts with me. And because um, it was, I guess, it was harder for me to ask for help for a couple different reasons. Obviously, it's hard to ask for help in general, so I didn't want to, and that was hard in itself. So that's why I really had to dig down deep and start with me because it wasn't as accessible, right? Especially from society's perspective. But the fact that it's more accessible, I am naturally more comfortable. But because for the last 10 years that I've had to, chip away through education, through self-reflection, and all sorts of those things to better understand myself, and next thing you know, I started to develop, mental skills, mechanisms, coping mechanisms. But then I realized they were like, wow, I'm actually more aware. Um, so I'm also more aware to the things that's happening around me. And then when you now to go to the other part of your question about how did the organization help me is look what we have access to now. People want to talk about it, and our local news station wants to talk about it. Our staff, they want to create a space so that the community can help us. Look, it's all there. So all I have to do was be myself. All I have to do was kind of say, hey, well, this is something that's real. But I know why it's real because it happened to me, and I'm a player. I'm a human being, and it happened to me. And I was known to be somebody, just a thriving young man. And however, when I did all through that self reflection, I realized that I put a lot of pressure on myself. Uh, did my environment now? Speaking of mental health, it's very environmental, right? Meaning that things around me communicate to me. When I'm not aware of that, I internalize it based on my conditions, right? So I think when my organization asks for help, what can we do? We're doing it. And now I have to go when there's a slow traction of what more can we do? I say, all right, Devante, what can I control? Oh, that's myself. That's one reminding with every conversation I can be with my teammates, always adding to their health. And then when my coach asks me how are we doing, being honest. And then when there's an opportunity, because I love the work and I try to make sense of it in the different areas of our organization, I'm honest with them. Nathan is on our field, Jessica's on our field. You're active on Facebook. I try to first smile, and then I say, how can I help? Because all I can do is be present, and all I can do is share my story. All I can do is be myself, and I'm helping. All right, we're all helping each other, and that's what happens. So I think I hope I answered your question there, but that's kind of how the process has been. So
No, you did. It is one thing that I know about you is that you stay with a smile no matter what. Um, it's always funny to me that me and joke, even when you got injured last year, me and was like, I think he has a smile on his face. I'm not sure, but I think he does. I'm not sure, but I feel like there's a smile in there.
hey, a lot of times it's like, oh, it's right away. It's like either I'm gonna continue to be more upset at it, or I'm going to try to make myself at first. Because I ain't gonna lie, we're human, right? It's hard, especially like this. I'm like, oh my goodness. So the best thing I can do is force that happiness out of me because that emotional mind doesn't want to come out because he knows, oh, that's it. Your emotional mind's gonna be like, that's it, dude. We're done. I can't believe you did this. So the best thing I can do is you better smile first. You got to get it out of you somehow. Put on a smile. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? So
definitely.
you got to have that. Again, it's a mechanism first, but then obviously after that, I have to go do my work. Right? Yeah.
So I want to ask this question. I think it's an important question to ask because last year the Kickers dealt with injury, and
Hmm.
that's my one Kickers plug for the day. I got to have my one. How was it mental health wise and with the injuries between you, Zev,
Mm.
Ian, Mumbai? How was it in that mental health space of, you know, all you guys got hurt last year and now collectively trying to come back? But the very first game of this year, one of you
Mm.
that was healthy got hurt again, unfortunately. How was it trying to keep everyone in that positive space? Because it's very easy,
Mm.
and we've seen it before with other sports about how we expect athletes to be these perfect people, these perfect individuals. Is how
Mm.
you're not supposed to get hurt, or you can just deal with it, or you can overcome it. How was it trying to stay positive in a positive mind state for you guys?
Yeah. Well, just speaking for myself, and then like knowing the nature of the injury in itself, and knowing obviously we play a sport where there's a lot of barbaric kind of nature out there. So it's naturally physical, and something is naturally physical. You're bound to clash, and just like anything in life, nothing is guaranteed. But when you bring an experience, to your fans and to yourself, you don't expect the worst. You expect the outcome, which is a win. And when reality sets in, when the human element sets in, right? Something is taken away. Right? COVID took away a lot from everybody. Um, and when the physical action is taken away from an athlete, it amplifies the suffering. So for us as athletes, everybody, majority of athletes, I don't have the data to prove it, but just from my experience, and you can ask any other athletes, there's not one athlete who hasn't been injured. So there's not one athlete who's dealt with suffering. And I think that's why the numbers from a collegiate level, which probably is reflective on the youth level, but to professional, I mean, 35% of athletes are even just asking for help, but only 10% receive it. So that only means what about the rest? You know what I'm saying? So really, that you can only imagine the data that's not there. So that means that one, because it's so normal, right? Physical combative, spaces are so normal that you forget about what happens if something's taken away. But when a few players kind of go through, which was obviously very, um, you know, just the timing, of the closeness, of all of our, extreme injuries, it adds an element of, okay, it's not just me going through it. So if I had to be there for myself like this, I know that and I'm lucky because before my injury, like my catastrophic injury was my mental health. So I have experience in the terms of knowing what it feels like when something is just ripped away from me because my mind is ripped away from me, and then I had to rebuild that back, and it's not easy. But now I realize nothing in life is easy, so try. So I think that's what I had to offer to my brothers because that's what they have to offer to me. That's what a team. That's why I love a team, whether it's soccer or not. Whether it's your workplace, like that's ultimately what it has to offer as a team. And I think naturally, they're like we have to come together as a team, and even that can be just normal over time. Oh, we're a team, but then when we suffer through an injury, it like forces us to be there more than just from a 5 to 10 yard pass. We have to be there each other emotionally, and I think you can have that without the injuries. And I think that's that's we can like talk about that later. Like that's what mental health has to offer. It has to offer community. It has to offer connection on just not just the physical level, but the emotional level, and embracing people. And that's ultimately that's humanness, that's humanity, that's love. So
Yeah, man. Wow, that's an amazing answer, yo. Because in that answer alone, you realize like out of something that can be so crippling to you mentally,
mm,
you're able to find the positives in it and able to
yeah,
still help those around you. Because it's very easy for you to go into your own shell to be like,
yes,
I just want to deal with it. I just want to get over it.
yes,
And I think another important thing you brought up is there is no right way of how to deal with it because, like you said, we are all different. We come from different communities. We're different people. We have different backgrounds. Even though me or you have the same skin complexion, we are inherently different people. And we're going to
yeah,
deal with stuff in different ways. So you just have to know as a colleague or as a friend or as a brother, as a sister, mom, dad, how to deal with those close to you. How do you deal with those moments where people have their low moments in different ways?
mm. Woo! I love that you brought that up because now we can talk about like well, it's mental health. It's the same. Like no, you're right. It's different, and there's what close to 8 billion people that live on this earth now. So literally, there's close to 8 billion ways that we all see something. There's value in that, right? If we can understand that, then we can understand that everybody offers a different value. And if we understand that everybody deserves to be communicated not just the same equally, but that means that we all have to figure out how we're being communicated to, let alone how we are communicating. You know what I'm saying? So it's like um, almost forget the basis of the question, but different, right? How do you address the different? Um, how do we address differentness? And really, like I said, we have to kind of do the work, right? The same way I have to do my work, I have to have a conversation with you. I have to say, where are you from? If I have my coaches here, I have to say, where are they from? If I have all my teammates here, you know how we get better? And even just knowing this from all my teams, but I remember being in Phoenix and playing with the late DDA. And I think when you have people of that magnitude, They pay attention more, just like, anybody of that status. But when you actually in it and with it in proximity of somebody, you tend to listen more, and what you think is going to happen isn't what happens. And how we became closer is we got together, we shared food, we actually uh, put soccer off to the side. We gave soccer to our life, but after that, because you think naturally you're going to work harder, we're going to do this, we're going to dream soccer, we're going to eat soccer. And yeah, it's important to keep soccer in your imagination all the time. But then as you grow in life, your identity isn't just wrapped up in kicking a ball. So, but you don't really understand that, like I said, for a lot of different reasons. But back to the sole purpose of why it's important to not forget about something, but to create spaces for other things. And really, those other things needs to embody sharing, right? Embodies getting to know somebody over a cup of coffee, or like we did in Phoenix after probably every playoff game. I'm telling you, and since we got there, we were doing things together. We got to know each other, and it relieved pressure, right? And pressure, we can probably talk about that next. Pressure is something that we all deal with, and if you look at mental health, it pressure is actually it's tight around the mental space, and when that pressure is relieved, you, just like your lungs, you can relax. That probably feels good. So when there's less pressure, there's you feel less constricted, and when you're less constricted, you feel free. And when you feel free, you have time to think. So the same thing holds true to everything else. We have to create spaces where we can get to know other people and not just ourselves. Because we do that, just like data, we need to compile the most data possible, here, not just here, not just in this region, because just because we know through history poverty exists here. No, suffering exists everywhere. But we just need to get to know everybody so we can get a good average.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think what it really comes down to, and listening to you just clicked in my head about like it's balance.
Balance.
You
Yeah.
need stuff to balance out. Like I am a teacher, which in itself is a heavy job, so I have the balance of being a podcaster. Being able to
Mm,
create these stories with
yeah.
people like yourself, and those moments where, because it's funny now being married. My wife will tell me she sees that I look stressed out. She was like, "Go listen to a podcast," and she just knows like that's like my balance. Like I'm able
Yeah.
to kind of escape reality, not escape reality for a second, but kind of just put myself in a soothing mindset of like, all right,
Mm.
once it's done, I can get back to what I'm doing. You
I,
know,
and not to cut you off, and I love that because I think a lot of times we undermine or we don't see our value in the things that we do like to do. And you know what I notice about you, relatively, I really don't, I've only got to know you for this is my second year getting to know you, and I'm like, wow, that's like this man, one is consistent at podcast, and clearly he loves to do it because he enjoys sharing these moments. And it's the fact that you continue to do it, but then when you describe it like that, and you have your wife respecting it, it's because she sees it too. And I think when something when we express ourselves and it's that clear and your passion desire, and there's somebody watching you, just like the way I think about you, I'm like, that's his thing. And I think that's what we all need to we need to find. We need to have access and say it's okay to express it, because when you do that, it like it is respected because you actually understand. You don't say that guy's crazy, but then I bet you'll never forget that person who loved it so much, and yet you'll never forget it. And then you probably go to sleep and be like, you know what? I wish I had a little bit of that. Well, we do have all a bit of that. We gotta find it. So I was just kind of using your example because, like, I think a lot of the time, especially I know as a kid, I thought my purpose was just to be the biggest, the best for the world. But really, it's like, how can I be the best for it? You know what I'm saying? And there's a space for everybody here. You know what I'm saying? There is a space. And a lot of us are walking in that space, but are we truly living in the space? And it could just be whether it's a podcast, whether it could be you starting a surfboard club, It's like, yo, this dude really loves surfboards. Like, well, shoot, that's his thing, and now he's creating a community. So again, I can go down this rabbit hole with you there, but again, I'm just really just repeating like why it's so important to have balance, right? And to allow like to have spaces where we can access like expression, but really just to why it's important for two people to be compatible, because I'm pretty sure your wife has things that you notice that she loves to do. And mutual respect is when you gonna let it happen, because when you let her be her, he lets you be you, and that's like what's dope. And then together, it's like a mutual understanding, and it's like that communication is love. You
Yeah,
know,
most definitely. Most
that's dope.
definitely.
So
It
hey, you helped me. That was all you right there, man. So that's it.
is.
I had to let you know, bro. Like you were like I'm like you were like I'm thinking you a legend already. Just let you know. You know.
Oh my god. You see, you sound like my friends, like all my other friends. They're like, "Oh, you media now? You media?" Because I got media credentials with the Kickers. I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm the same Elliot. I be chilling. I be chilling."
Right. This is you. Like you literally be chilling. I can tell. Like this is literally you chilling. Right. But for somebody else, they can't wait to come watch it. Then it grows because you like, no, this whether it's one person watches or not, it's me and you right now. And
Yeah.
that's what you like to do. And that's what's the dopest part about it. But anyway, go ahead.
I just got one more question to ask you, man. And
Yeah,
by the way, this has been like a great conversation. Like for you to
really
come on
have.
this
I'm
podcast
really
has
enjoying
been
this, man.
amazing. um, in this past year, we've seen a lot of not only Black supporters group grow in Madison and Chicago and Atlanta, here in Richmond, out in New Mexico. We've also seen Black supporters use their voice more,
Mm.
because before it was a space where we didn't know how to navigate. We didn't know if it was for us or not yet. But we have also seen the evolution and the growth of Black media when it comes to podcasts like 2 Cent Sports or For the Culture or Shea Butter FC.
Mm.
For somebody that plays the game, what does it mean to you to see now you see representation in all facets of the game when it comes to supporters culture, media, front office staff?
You said Shea Butter FC?
Yes.
Yo, I gotta follow them. The Shea Butter sponsor. I hope they got some sponsors because that's dope. I need
Look,
that. I
man,
need a I need
we're
a I need a
working
Shea
on
I
it,
need
yo.
a Shea Butter FC jersey too. That's 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 I
After
love
this, I'll
that.
send you the link to their podcast, man.
Yeah,
They
send
are
me the link.
amazing
But
people.
but um but I don't know. I heard this from was it Jay-Z? Doesn't matter. But the truth is, and the honesty is, Black culture. Um, Obviously, you can to a certain breadth. I don't want to use the word exploitation, but it's everybody has, I guess, an ability, and everybody I feel like arrives here with an ability. We can call those gifts, and that is true within your starts with yourself because you are your own community, and then it just expands, right? Just all the way to what our nation is, what American actually means to us, to other countries. But where I'm going with this is Black culture is probably it's our export, right? That's our that's our I would say our asset, right? One can say that is our asset. That is not our. However, what can get confusing is it got worked into our identity, right? So that can be very conflicting when it's got worked into an identity. However, it may be our best asset in terms of expression. Those are very two things to try to understand. So I think when you have so many different cultural entities come about, ultimately you're going to see us be at our best, which is expressing ourselves, whether that be Shea Butter FC, whether that be um, whatever Black ventures there is. We're going to do a damn good job of being expressive and how to sell it and how to give it to ourselves. That's where Tulsa, Oklahoma City. That's why it was all the attention. That's why we created Black Wall Street. We've accelerated in those assets because Black culture and expression is our mainstream. But what was with an identity, right? It became our identity. Therefore, it gave us limitations. And when you are limited, that means that we might not be associated with the engineer, or we might not be associated with anything of an intellectual, only just something of we come from we're genius because we're the best entertainers or the best athletes. So I think when we have entities that are diverse, right? It's one thing to be expressive, but it's important for all these entities to come from an educational in a representative way and connecting to every industry around it, right? Because you can stand on your own if you're a Black entity, but how are we able to reach out to other establishments for educational purposes, for vocational and learning experiences, so that we can utilize, our gifts, but also because it's important, right? I also think culture is which I love. I also think culture is pivotal to a cell, right? Anything that is texturized, anything that feels good is going to be anything that's engaging is going to be received, and you're going to make money off of it, right? However, when you're able to add a different aspect to it, like Nip said, like we have to do a better job, as a hip hop artist to give, these songs more meaning, more impact, right? And that's like whether you're trying to become from a more political way, that it has to give breath, right, to something more than just what we're probably identified with. We can't combat it, right? We can, but if we combat it, right, from an aggressive way, then whoever is on the other end of that is probably going to be closed off to receiving it. So again, just to conclude, there are like all these spaces are fantastic, right? We need more because remember we need expression to understand and feel and to express our gifts because we do have things to offer to everything else. That is our asset, but it is not our identity. So that's why it's imperative that we branch out and add those other pieces so that we can be seen culturally, right? Because culture is really a conditioning, right? So if we can condition other aspects that's viewed as intellectual or that's viewed as somebody who can do more than just entertain, I think just naturally we're not going to associate people who look like you and I to an athlete, to somebody who could dance, somebody who could jump, right? Somebody who is scary, right? We'll associate it over time because that's all we got here, right? That's what we can guarantee is time. And what happens is there by nature, right? You're going to see the culture shift. You're going to see people not tense like this when they see me and you to go like this. But over time, it's going to get all the way down to here. I don't know when, but it's coming. So that's why it's important for all these entities to do more than they can.
Wow, man, that is a real powerful point, man, and I think that's a great way how to not put a in this conversation, but to keep the conversation going in different communities and things like that.
Yeah.
Once again, man, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your day for coming on our show. Before we wrap up, was there anything that you're working on personally? Where can everyone reach out to you at?
Yes, I am. I'm actually hoping by the end of the year I end up launching the space. It's really actually about it can be. I feel like at first it's an educational forum actually, called Different Tones, and I'll get more on that later. But for now, you can always reach me at Instagram. I'm not very active in like my approach as how we're having conversation and how I'm delivering my understanding. I do that on my page, but I'm not consistent with it like you, my friend. But Different Tones is a space that I put a lot of thought to and a lot of structure to. So that remember we talked about. I love that you talked about these other entities, and I will become one of those spaces. But like I said, it's even harder to make sure that it expands than just the Black space, right? So with that being said, I have a lot to come. In the meantime, to stay tuned, not just to me, to stay tuned to you because you're consistent right now. And the more that I'm around consistency, people again associate me with you. So there's not too much they can do, but follow me and if you see me in the field in the community, say what's up.
Most definitely. Well, as always, listeners, we thank you for taking the time on your day to listen to our podcast. You can listen to us on all podcast forums. You can reach out to us at River City 93. So with that being said, you guys have a great day. We'll holler at you guys later.